Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We are over-caffeinated and underprepared. We are slightly right and slightly reliable. We are your morning show for any hour. We're going to talk about the news, and there's so much news. We got tariffs. We got trade wars. We got USAID. We got Democrats weeping over USAID. We got federal worker buyouts, Panama news, and Dems trying to figure out what the heck they stand for at the DNC in order to become a party that comes back from these 4 years. But before we get to all that, how's it going, Vic?
Hello, Mary Katharine. Doing fine. Much like Alexis de Tocqueville, I am continuing to discover America over the weekend. I was in Nashville, Tennessee for the first time.
For the first time?
For the first time. I've been to Memphis. I've been to Beale Street
my.
and Graceland, which is amazing. But I had never been to Nashville, and everyone's talking about Nashville these days. Everybody's moving to Nashville, for that matter. And Kate had a work thing, so I said, maybe I can just tag along for my birthday weekend. Yes.
Very nice.
Birthday's on a Sunday, so that's going to be a travel day. But I said,
Which is a subtle way of telling me that I missed it. Sorry about that, Vic.
Nobody knows. I don't make a big thing. And the older you get, the less you... I woke up on Sunday and thought, oh, it's my birthday. I actually thought that versus my special day. But then the day before was wonderful. And so things that I discovered out there, Nashville. Number one, people do talk about how Nashville's much changed,
Yes.
just over the last 10 years or whatever. And they call it Nash Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a Broadway.
They do.
And cowboy hats. Now, I always think of cowboy hats as out west or Texas. And when you think about the South, like if I go to South Carolina, I'm not going to see cowboy hats.
No,
right,
you're more likely to
se.
see a baseball cap, like a dirty white baseball cap in the South. Yes.
So, but Tennessee is, and it's funny because geographically speaking, it borders Virginia. And when you take the plane, you're just basically going west for about an hour and 40 minutes, right?
It is in Middle Tennessee.
Middle Tennessee.
That's what they call it.
Yes. Yes, that's right. How do you know so much about this, Mary?
I know things about Tennessee.
It's broken up into basically the state, culturally, regionally speaking. There's the western part, which is Memphis, the middle part, central Tennessee, and then eastern Tennessee. Mm-hmm. I like this because I'm sure a lot of our listeners you're just discovering this now. I'm like Ezra Klein.
They're like, there are three parts of Tennessee.
And I'll tell you, and I had always thought that Knoxville was the capital, and it was. And then it moved to Nashville. There was a brief moment where they tried to push for Murfreesboro. But anyway.
Just so everybody knows, in North Carolina, we have the coastal plains, the Piedmont, and the mountain region. So you're getting a nice overview of a couple of U.S. states today.
And it also, likewise in New Jersey, there's north, central, and south, except for the north and the south. People say that central does not exist.
Oh,
the
really?
People in the central part say we do.
I would say it doesn't
here.
as well, because given that our central parts in Middle Tennessee or the Piedmont of North Carolina are like hundreds of miles wide.
Yes. Okay, fine. No, if you went from the southwestern corner of Tennessee to the northeastern corner of Tennessee, that would be what, like the entire East Coast?
I mean, it is. If you travel the length of North Carolina into the length of Tennessee, it's a long, long drive.
I loved their very
geography with MK and Vic.
Yes, which are getting hammered. I like the accent. Mm-hmm. It's a very distinct one. We went to Mass on Sunday, but the only one that we could fit in was a morning Mass. It turned out to be a Novus Ordo Latin Mass. Okay. So that was kind of fun to listen to when the priest is talking Dominus vobiscum, et cum spiritu tuo.
That's great.
You like that?
Southern Latin.
It was Southern Latin. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting. But the most important thing is
chicken fried Latin.
That's right. Mm-hmm. The most important thing is I went on. Our friend at the Daily Wire, Brent Schur, gave me the grand tour of Broadway. We went to a number of places, including Morgan Wallen's.
Did you throw a chair?
No.
Isn't that the thing you do there?
What? Well, there's like 4 or 5 levels, and there are 4 or 5 bands. Like one.
Isn't it Morgan Wallen who got in trouble for throwing a chair off of the roof of a bar?
So I don't know much.
Let me not get sued over this. I'll look it up and make sure I'm correct. But go ahead.
I don't know much about country music, but I'm very open to it. Mm-hmm. And so I liked all the music without knowing what it was. And then I went to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum.
Yes, tell us, Vic, What era of country music do you like? Are you a classic country music guy, a 70s country music guy, a more poppy 90s country music guy, or a bro country guy? Those are your categories.
I think I'm open to all the eras, Mary Katharine, and I
Morgan
walk myself through.
Wallen's solidly in the bro country area.
Okay.
Wallen threw a chair from 6th story of Chief's Bar in downtown Nashville. The chair landed on Broadway, a major street in Nashville known for its bars and music venues. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of misdemeanor reckless endangerment. That could have been very dangerous.
Yes.
That was 2024.
Don't throw a chair. Allen Iverson threw a chair.
That's a real bro country move
yes.
right there.
I don't think I was at Chiefs. I can't remember anymore. There was a lot of Tennessee whiskey involved. But our friend Mike Warren said that he went to Vanderbilt.
Yes.
And he went to Chiefs and saw Tommy Two-Tone, and they got him to play, he says, his famous song 8675309 and his other big hit. And I said, he had 2? Okay. But the music's great, and I'm not a live music person. I'm like, like here in town, we're going to, the Wharf to see, at Anthem to watch. That takes a lot of effort for me, so I don't do it. But in Nashville,
it's everywhere.
You walk down the street, the alleys, the Printer's Alley or wherever, there's music coming out of different places, and if you like it, just pop in, have a beer. Yep. And so that's what I did, and the musical acts were amazing. No, even at the Food Assembly Hall, this woman who wants to might be the next Taylor Swift, and it was very sweet.
No, it is really something else to go from place to place in Nashville and holes in the wall, and you have these amazing artists, because all the recording artists, all the studio audience artists are there, and they're incredible. Then you got up and comers, you got writers
trying to be discovered,
singer-songwriters. It's a fun time, and live music, really a difference maker.
It really is. And sometimes somebody was joking around that some of the performances were better than the actual bands, like the covers were better. Okay, so that was one thing, and then lastly, I did have to have hot chicken, the Nashville Hot.
Okay,
there was a lot of talk about Hattie B's versus Prince's. And I ended up at Prince's.
Okay.
I might try Hattie B's later, but I had Prince's Hot.
This is like a Philly cheesesteak situation where you have to
rival.
Gotcha.
That is correct. So I went to Prince's and I got myself just hot. But apparently the mild is already kind of on the hot side.
Okay.
I finished the hot. I think one word to describe it is fiery.
Was it fiery but peaceful?
Fiery but mostly peaceful. Yes, the next morning. I was so hungry that and they put it on like a slice of white bread to soak up all the juices. I love fried chicken so much. I just want to say this. And I went to another place called Puckett's because I was alone while Kate was doing work stuff. And I had like 4 pieces of fried chicken at Puckett's regular. And I'm just sitting there at a high top, just going to town. The wingtips.
Fried chicken is very hard to beat.
Yeah, no, it's so good. I love it so much. And that might be like up there with my like last meal, fried chicken and oysters or something, right? It would be amazing. But let me just say this. On my way out, Nashville Airport, which is a lovely airport, multiple live performances. Blake Shelton's Places, they're all red. And just people like, duets in the middle of the concourses.
Right.
There was a Hattie B's hot chicken place. And I just thought to myself, Mary Katharine, do you really want to be having hot chicken like, the different levels, and the hottest levels shut the cluck up? Right before you get on a plane? Do you think that's a good idea?
I think for some people it would not be a good idea. As I think we've discussed on the show before, I have a stomach of steel, so not a problem for me.
I think if I had the shut the cluck up chicken at Hattie B's, I'd be flying on the red eye. Thank you. Enjoy that one, Jennifer.
I'm glad you spared everyone.
No, but I'm like the reverse of like the country bumpkin who comes into New York and stares at all the skyscrapers, right? And I'm like looking at everything else. I mean, it's an hour and 40 minutes away by plane, and it's just a whole other world.
And
people are really friendly.
So it has grown a lot since I started hanging out there way back. The first
what would bring you to Nashville?
So when I first went to Nashville in around, 2009-ish or so, I think I'd been before, but it was a smaller place.
Wow.
It's huge
as
now.
recently as 2009.
Yes. I mean, it's been growing by leaps and bounds because other large cities in America have gone insane, and people who want a large city with some live music and
Yeah.
some good restaurants, go to Nashville to live in safe suburbs and enjoy some of the perks of a large city without insanity, ideological or criminally.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And
So
you
it's
can buy a lot. You get a lot more for your buck in
Yes.
terms of housing out there,
yes.
even in suburbs like Brentwood or wherever, than you would here.
When I first started visiting there, I went to a hole in the wall, the name of which I currently cannot remember, but on a Wednesday night at this hole in the wall, a group of brothers who were all studio and touring backup musicians with bands would come to play together at this little bar on a Wednesday night, particularly on holiday weeks, because they'd all be touring and then they'd come back together to spend time with their family.
Oh.
And so they would all get together, whichever brothers came home there. They were originally from North Carolina and Virginia, but it's a group of brothers who are all incredibly talented.
So they're like session artists.
Yes, and they are an African-American family. One of the guys, Future Man, is a percussionist, I believe, with Bella Fleck and the Flecktones.
Oh, sure.
Others have toured with other major bands. Rudy, who I think was the youngest, had some developmental disabilities, but was a prodigy sax player. And I got to see him play before he passed away. He did pass away in about 2010. But to see all those guys come together in like a tiny
Hole in the
wall and just jam out
Very cool.
was amazing. And it's the kind of thing that you're only going to find in a place like Nashville. Their name is the Wooten Brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. And Reggie is the oldest. They call him the teacher. And then he has a bunch of younger siblings who made amazing things of themselves. One of the things that Rudy could do, the sax player, which if you were ever a band nerd like me, is cool, is he could play two saxes at the same time in his embouchure.
Wow.
And two, he did circular breathing, which is you can sustain a note because you can breathe while playing. I have never been able to accomplish such a thing, but it is quite a thing to see because you can just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Anyway, really neat family, and one of those things where, just so much American musical history in one group of people.
I can't wait to go back, and I like to go and I'm like watch more musical acts, try more Tennessee whiskeys.
Got to do that.
Yeah, I had Greenbrier Nelson Brothers. I think it was delicious, among others. And again, like I said, I learned a lot at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum because again, I knew nothing, including basically, the origin of country music is both sort of Africans who came over as slaves combined with Scots-Irish in the area of very, very Western Virginia / Tennessee.
Yes.
And
the Appalachian,
the
Smoky
Appalachian
Mountains area.
That's right. And so one has the Scots-Irish, would have a fiddle, and then the Africans would have a banjo, and then this thing was born. And then, and I sound like Ezra Klein from Vox when he once tweeted out, "You're not going to believe it. I just saw a movie called On the Waterfront, and I'm sure you've never seen it, but it's where the quote, I could have been a contender comes from." And I'm here to inform the rest of you listeners that I've discovered something you don't know anything about. But no, I learned, and I also learned that.
Have you heard of country music?
I know. I didn't know that.
There's also something called bluegrass and gospel.
Right. So at Hillbilly, and that records were marketed either as Hillbilly or race records. I mean, it's just fascinating stuff. And country western. So Roy Rogers, Tex Ritter, of course, the father of John Ritter, and then country rock and the birth of bands like the Eagles. And I didn't realize the Eagles were Linda Ronstadt's band. So I just learned things.
You learned things. I'm so glad for you.
Thank you. And Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde was recorded in Nashville, thanks to another fellow named Charlie McCoy. So there you go. I'm done. But anyway, I can't wait to go back. It was a great place.
It is a great place. Let me note also, I knew I was forgetting one. Joseph Wooten, one of the Wooten brothers, played with the Steve Miller Band for years.
Very cool.
They all are out on the road with everyone. And Rudy, who was like I said, the youngest who passed away, reportedly passed away with his saxophone around his neck. I know. dedicated
dedicated
to
and
the art.
fitting. I thought about this myself, Mary Catherine, when I was at Puckett's eating my 4th piece of fried chicken, and I thought, if it
That
happens
you're
now,
You
all right,
are also.
I kind of shrugged. I
You
was
are
like,
similarly dedicated to the art.
yeah, and they would have been like, well, it's sad, but it was kind of fitting that he died there.
Yeah.
I would have been fine. How are you?
I'm good.
Sorry, 15 minutes into
I know.
this.
I feel like we should get to the news, but
I'm sorry.
it's okay. I got to talk about the Wooten brothers, who are a fantastic group of people, and I think are touring post-COVID a little bit together. So if you ever want to see them, they are fantastic and do the whole gamut of like Motown to country to rock and roll. They're fantastic. Okay, shall we move on to the news?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Shall we talk about tariffs? Tariffs. Okay. So tariffs are a thing that not only does Trump talk about all the time, but he has spoken about consistently. And there are not that many issues that he's been ideologically consistent on. Tariffs and immigration, I think, are basically the two. He also doesn't mind debt because he's a business guy. I think some of this comes from the fact that he's a business guy. And he's like, well, we're in competition with these other countries, and how do we get the best deal with these other countries? And some of them are screwing us over when it comes to trade. So we need to do something with that. Now, you and I, Vic, are more traditional free traders.
Yes.
Which makes me concerned about the economic effects of tariffs, which are essentially a tax.
It's how we were ideologically raised.
It was. And free trade indeed has its downsides, and people who do not benefit as much from it, right? When you have a situation where you change from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. So there are real downsides there. However, tariffs, which were used basically to sort of fund the government in the beginning of the 20th century, are not capable of funding the government at its current size. Hey, look, I would love for the government to be much smaller, that you could make the argument that you could fund them, but Trump's vision that they would fund the government is, I think, impractical. Yeah. They are taxes that you put on the imports from other countries, and they would raise prices for many goods if they went into effect. Trump this week was like, look, we're putting 25% tariffs on Mexico. Right. 25% tariffs on Canada, and 10% on China.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I feel like if you're going to endure some economic disruption, which tariffs will bring if they are implemented at this level, there's a sliding scale for how much you're willing to tolerate, with the most problematic countries being the ones you would most likely tolerate your goods becoming more expensive from. So, like, if we want to punish China, people are on board with that. Mexico, have a few more problems with the cartels and such. Canada, kind of annoying with Trudeau, but like, are we...
Not for long with Trudeau, too.
No, and he will be on his way out. So anyway, there was a threat of these tariffs that they would be implemented on Saturday. Both Mexico and Canada say, haha, if you're going to raise tariffs on us, we are going to retaliate with these tariffs. Yeah. Now, many argue, and they're correct on the relative leverage here, that Canadians, we get far less from Canadians than Canadians get from us. We get far less from Mexico than Mexico gets from us. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we have leverage here. They're going to fold on whatever the president is asking them to do. And so we won't have to endure these tariffs. But
China.
Also, what are we asking them to do? Is another question.
Yes.
So sorry.
Okay.
I'm not even letting Vic talk.
I'm
listening. I want to give two examples of where the tariff negotiation has been extremely successful and quick and explicit about what the president wants.
Straightforward.
Number one, Colombia. Yeah. We're going to slap tariffs on you if you don't take these criminals back. Please send your plane, President of Colombia.
Which he did.
Done. Okay. In 2019 or 2020, I can't remember which one, France tried to do some internet tax nonsense on technology that was going to mess with the U.S. Trump deemed it unfair. He said, all right, 100% tariff on champagne.
Yeah.
Macron. And Macron was like, oh, no, not that. Not that.
That was pretty good.
And so that solved that pretty quickly. In this case, the asks were not very specific.
It's about the fighting of the drug war.
Right.
So in the Mexico case, this is about illegal immigration and fentanyl. And in the Canada case, I mean, energy is a big issue, but also immigration because people are coming through that northern border, which is extremely porous as well. I was just going to have you talk about tariffs while I talked about Nashville again, and then that I'd be very comfortable with this. But it didn't even talk about Hank Williams. But so the tariff thing is very interesting, and it puts a lot of conservatives in a weird spot.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, traditionally, we are about free trade. I get it. I get what he's saying, which is trade deficits, right? We buy a lot of stuff that's foreign. It's harder for us to sell a lot of our things, for example, American products, American cars, in Europe. Mm-hmm. So the EU is also in his crosshairs, but not quite yet. Right now, he's dealing with...
He makes not an unfair point that many of these, that China, that Europe, that Canada, they have rules that do not allow us to actually have a free trade back and forth.
Right. That's right. It also reminded me of the old parent adage right before you were to discipline a child. In the olden days, as they say, and, they would say, trust me, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. This is the reverse. This is Trump saying this is going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me, And so when it came to other countries and allies, Canada and Mexico, they blinked.
Yes. So let me read the New York Times quick, just sort of summary of this. Canada secured a 30-day postponement in the application of U.S. tariffs on its exports on Monday afternoon, just hours before they were scheduled to go into effect, after a call between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada and President Donald J. Trump yielded a border deal that seemed to satisfy both leaders. Mr. Trudeau had earlier pledged to retaliate against U.S. tariffs by imposing tariffs against U.S. goods, too. In the end, he seemed to make modest concessions to Mr. Trump on the border policies, including thousands of frontline personnel stationed at the border. I believe he also named like a fentanyl czar. I think that might have been new. Modest additions to things they had already said they were going to do. Again.
And this is just a pause, by the way. This is a 30-day or so pause before the imposition of tariffs, not that problem solved.
Mexico also offered that they were going to send 10,000 troops to the border.
Yes.
They had also already offered to do that. There is some sharpening of the rhetoric. I think one of the things Trump really gets out of this is, I threatened a tariff. These people bent the knee.
Right.
Now you have to evaluate how much they actually bent the knee each time this happens, and whether it's worth the disruption and uncertainty to the economy that is caused by a guy announcing tariffs every couple of months.
I think that the unpredictability is kind of built in to the assumptions, particularly with the markets. And some had been predicting there was going to be the stock market was going to plummet the other day. But I feel like either A, they sort of incorporated in their mind, okay, here we go. The roller coaster begins of this unpredictable sort of policy decisions and imposition of tariffs possibly. But also B, that they kind of assumed something was going to be, it was somehow going to be averted. And it was.
Well, and that's usually what happens. I believe the tariffs that are in place from Trump's first term are the ones against China, which again, I think are a more sympathetic and politically palatable set of tariffs.
Right.
I do wonder, the Trump philosophy seems to want it both ways, which is tariffs are really good economic policy, and we're only going to punish people who are being rude to us, and we're going to see tons of benefit from the tariffs, just as a plain out, just as a economic policy. Also, tariffs are just a threat because they're really, really harmful, and we're going to immediately avert them.
Right.
But why do we need to immediately avert them if they're good for us?
I think that you would like to think that he knows this. And he did talk about...
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yes.
Yeah.
He talked about short-term pain. right? That it might happen.
Which, by the way, feels like a very, with apologies to our our biggest Trump supporters, it feels like a very lib talking point.
Oh, the short-term pain?
Like, this is for the greater good.
Yeah.
And prosperity will eventually come.
Right.
But in the meantime...
Well, prosperity will hopefully come by 2028. I mean, you think about the recession of 1982 under Reagan, and had that happened in 84, he would have had, I think, a harder race to run. But of course, by then it rebounded into turning into the, unprecedented, longest sustained boom at the time, right? So there's a part of that, I think, that gets taken and put into the calculus. And the other thing is,
but I think the sell-off, such that it was after the announcement of these tariffs, was less than the DeepSeek China AI sell-off.
Oh, right.
Right. So it was not
NVIDIA.
It was not catastrophic. I think you're right that it's sort of baked in.
It's baked in.
Whether that's good or bad is
right.
Your mileage may vary.
And you also wonder how much of it is Trump's mindset that I'm not running again for a re-election.
Yeah.
This is sort of a second term. I'm just going to do what I want to do and see what happens. But we've had tariffs, as you mentioned, in the past, but tariffs used purportedly for national security purposes, we'll see.
Also, he does have the power to do this, just to be like on the constitutional front. He does have the power to do this because Congress gave the executive the power to do this.
In like 1977.
Which I would argue they shouldn't have done, because these are very large economic changes to be enacted at the stroke of a pen. So Congress, maybe do your job. But
I also think, Mary Katharine, that one very important factor in declaring a pause in the imposition of the 25% tax in Mexico had to do with the avocados because of the Super Bowl.
I mean,
it's coming up. We need the guac.
We need them. Now, the argument, too, from the more tariff-friendly side is that Mexican avocados would become more expensive and we would buy California avocados.
Yes.
And that's how you sort of adjust your economy to become more America-centric. However, for a lot of products, that is going to be not a smooth landing, a soft landing, as the Biden folks liked to say about inflation and the economy. It would not be a soft landing. You would have some real spikes in prices, which is a huge political liability for Trump if it comes to pass.
And the other thing is, we all like to buy California avocados when they're available, but they are not available year-round. I actually wrote about this towards the end of the Weekly Standard, which is...
You would be on the avocado beat.
I was.
Do we have someone on the dip beat?
Yes, that's me. That's me.
That was back when magazine journalism was really on top of the world.
Yes.
We had a dip beat guy.
The avocados in Mexico, of course, they're available year-round.
Right.
So, yes, we want to support them, but then you'd have to have more of a seasonal change where you can't have avocados, obviously, or as many avocados available in February. The avocados that we all like, by the way, are the Hass avocados, and that was first, interestingly enough, developed by Rudolf Hass in 1925.
Oh,
a German. He was a
German made the best avocados,
and that was not either. He was like a mail carrier. He was a mailman, but he was an amateur horticulturalist, and then came up with the tree apparently is still there in California, and it's the kind that we like, and it's very buttery and rich. I get it, but
my kids love them. The toddlers, they call them cado. I'm a cado, mama.
Get them started early.
Cado, please.
I was a late comer to avocados and guacamole.
It's a funny thing for kids to like because it's like slimy and green.
Texture, exactly.
But they're into them, and it's really good fat.
It's very good fat.
Very good fat.
That's very good. Okay, so
Mexico, I should note, agreed to deploy 10,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border in exchange for a 1-month delay on President Donald Trump's threatened tariffs. That's the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. She made the announcement on social media Monday morning, roughly 12 hours before the tariffs were set to be in effect. Trump and Sheinbaum spoke on Monday and agreed that Mexico will do more to combat drug trafficking into the U.S. and that the U.S. will step up efforts to block the flow of firearms into Mexico. I mean, it is... She has promised some of these things before. It is an important recognition on Mexico's part to say, yeah, we should do more on these cartels. We have not been doing what we should have done.
And here's the other thing, Mary Katharine, which is Trump and the administration, he does not have the benefit of the media. The media do not have his back. So when inflation was beginning to happen at the beginning of the Biden term in 2021, there was denial that it was going to happen.
Right.
Do you remember the award-winning, prize-winning economists, 40-some-odd signatories saying that there's not going to be inflation? And then Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, saying it's going to be transitory inflation, and then somehow trying to find a way to blame it on Trump.
Yes.
Trump is not going to have that benefit. The moment prices go up on anything, they were ready. They were making jokes at the Grammys about the price of maple syrup going up.
Well, you can see it on you can see it on the eggs already, where it's a very specific cause and effect. It's avian
They are going
flu.
to be on it. And if you remember, when inflation was happening, the other side would just dismiss it. And also say, how much do you need? How much are you spending?
I know. I love the idea, by the way, that Trump's tariffs are going to turn the whole left into Reaganite free traders. And I'm watching them like, wait, what? Suddenly all y'all are reading iPencil? Like, where did this come from? We're Milton Friedmaning over here on the left, and I'm more deeply confused than I have been in quite some time. I do think that on the tariff front, iPencil is a good read, because what happens is you don't just put tariffs on things and magically you have a renewed manufacturing sector, because many parts for different things come from different parts of the world, and they're not all just made in America. So you cut yourself off from important parts of a manufacturing product that come from Canada or come from Mexico. So anyway, iPencil always recommended. My children have read it, and you should too.
My econ.
Or just look up Freedom to Choose on YouTube. That's a good one too.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can all use a refresher course. My son is taking an econ course. We didn't have the only econ. I told him the only econ course we had in my high school was home ec.
Actually, even that one would be preferable to what kids get now in school.
It's true.
Just home ec. We had home ec too. We did I cross stitched a pillow one time.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't say that I learned much more than that. I think by that point, home ec had degraded by that point.
No, I mean, these are like life skills.
It'd be nice if we learned those. Okay. Right now, we have to learn adulting on the internet when we're 32. So it's not good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I do think about one last thought about the tariffs is that the uncertainty is a cost in and of itself. So for the next month, the markets and these two governments of allies will be wondering what's going to happen. I would also say on the political front, for Canada, it's interesting because you got one liberal PM on his way out who, he's a lib anyway. I'm not sure he cares about the economy. Like, what was he going to, is he so sad to burn it down? I don't know. Now, he did, make these statements and sort of bend the knee a little to Donald Trump. But then you got Pierre Poilievre, who's the likely successor, a conservative, a more free trade guy, who is incentivized to stand up to Trump and America just for because Trump's doing the 51st state thing and he needs to be his own guy.
Right. What is best for Canada?
So I think you got to weigh those political considerations as well. And then last, for the pro-tariff folks, it does feel like, how liberals talk about the sin taxes? Taxes on alcohol, taxes on cigarettes in particular.
Sure.
It's always we're going to put in the soda tax or the cigarette tax because it's good for everybody because we'll raise a lot of money, but also because we need you to smoke and drink less soda. And it's okay, well, which is it?
Yeah.
Which is it?
That's right. That's right. It was the great dilemma that, about
because if you make people drink less and smoke less, you're going to bring in less money. So I feel I have the same vibe on the tariff arguments. Which, again, I'm pretty friendly to him using for threats and getting things very specifically and very quickly. I'm not, that doesn't make me all that mad.
Right. And, I mean, it just turns out that the countries where he can extract concessions are generally allies. And the country that is now resisting his first great challenge here is going to be China. Because as of now, China's we're going to retaliate because that's how tariffs work. You impose a tariff on them. They will impose a tariff on you. and then it hurts people in our
Right.
country who are trying to sell things abroad.
This is, by the way, another thing that
We'll see what happens with China.
that I think has some lib tendencies is the idea of that I don't like when Democratic presidents do it, when Obama did it, when Biden did it, which is coming down hard on your allies because they're more rational, while you come down lighter on enemies because they're not rational actors.
Right.
And that flip-flops the incentives in a bad way. So anyway, for now, I think the right tack is not to freak out entirely every time this happens. I think the stock market shows that this week, and these concessions, such that they have got us at least to a detente at the moment.
It's also going to be interesting, the mood of the country and a gauge of where they get their news from, the American public. Because if you're tuning in, obviously, to MSNBC or CNN or the other mainstream outlets, it's a constant.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to happen.
Most of them get their news here, so that's good news.
Oh, you mean getting
most of America gets their news from us.
From getting hammered,
Right.
yeah. So, I mean, the point is that then don't panic. You'll be fine. Just like one of our listeners, the panic. But if, and then if you go elsewhere, obviously in Fox, you're going to be talking about other things and more of the positive things that happen with the administration. And that's the thing. Tariffs are just one part.
Oh, there's so much happening.
Of what's happening. And the new, we thought in the news business, we thought, well, get through the election, then we can just have a little quiet time. There is no quiet time.
No,
not in this administration.
Speaking of the good news, right? There are ways that Trump does stuff that I'm very comfortable with. Loved to see Americans coming home from Afghanistan who were held by the Taliban. Americans coming home from Venezuela who I did not even know were being held there. Yeah. After one meeting, Rick Grinnell comes back on a plane with like 7 Americans. Love to see it. Marco Rubio, who is playing good cop to Trump's bad cop, the Secretary of State, living his best life, going down to Panama, going to Mass, meeting with Panamanian officials. One meeting in, Panama's like, you know what? We're not going to be part of China's, what is the name of it? It's
Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road Initiative, which is basically a thing to sort of
take over the world,
co-opt the world and its economic avenues and economic forces.
We will give you
into
money.
The Chinese, under the Chinese umbrella.
Right. You need help with your infrastructure. We're here to help. Just a little bit of influence.
Yes. Yeah. So Panama now says, we're not going to do that so much anymore here.
That's right.
Which is a great development, and one that a week ago many people were telling you there's no need to worry about China and the Panama Canal. That's not a thing. Yeah. Well, the Belt and Road Initiative it reaches everywhere. Many places. Yeah. Universities also have plenty of money and allied.
Oh, it's like the Confucius Institutes.
Yes, that sort of pop up all over the U.S. in these intellectual
what are they
centers.
Teaching them?
There's all sorts of tentacles reaching around with this thing. So that's good news. I joked that could we just call Marco Rubio Tariff and send him places that Trump is mad at, and then we'll just get good results, but it will be Rubio getting them.
Deployed.
Could we do that?
Deployed by somebody.
Deploy the tariff.
That's right, meaning him.
And it would be Marco Rubio.
Yes, that's right. Belt and Road. This is a big deal. Panama is the first country in Central America to say, you know what, we're done, we're out. The only other country that I know of, in fact, that has backed out of Belt and Road was Italy under Giorgia Meloni.
Oh.
And she says, we're not getting anything.
Remember when she was going to be the fascist that brought the world to an end?
That's right. Sons of Italy, more like the daughter of Italy. And, I mean, in the Mussolini sense. But, of course, people are like, you know what? This is better than the alternative.
She seems all right.
Yeah, she seems all right.
Yeah.
Traditional values. But and this is the thing. I think that, anyway, the media is going to be like, they have a hard time grappling with people that are embracing certain, values, or the idea, the notion, for example, we've talked about this in previous shows, that illegal immigrants are in fact breaking the law because they're illegal, you know, and they're like, this is crazy, but not really.
Right.
So,
and by the way, as we either agree or disagree with these folks and with the Trump administration, it is true that he was very clear
what he was going to
about what he was doing.
Yeah.
So many of these things are not surprises
that
we will
that
argue
means,
against nonetheless, depending on the situation.
Everything he has said he's doing, which means that probably by the time you're listening to this, we're going to Mars. It's happening. No, I mean, I mean, this is a good thing to sort of put a stop to the Belt and Road Initiative because it's this sort of a power thing. Taiwan, I'm more concerned about, but that's a whole other subject.
So this sort of segues into the next big change and the next big dust up, which is over USAID. So USAID, which honestly I would have said was part of State Department, but it turns out it's not.
It's like its own thing.
It's just its own thing. And it is a grant-making organization inside the federal government that gives all sorts of grants, allegedly, should be for advancing American interests or the interests of freedom and democracy abroad to all sorts of entities in foreign countries, NGOs, etc. Doge, which we have talked about and wondered, okay, is this going to be like a blue ribbon panel that just has some recommendations about what should be done? I was somewhat optimistic that a guy like Musk, who thinks differently about everything and every system, could actually figure out how to tame parts of the federal government. And it looks like Doge has started aggressively with USAID. Yeah. Which is sort of, at the moment, deleted. Although there's been some quick backing off of that, where it was like, this agency isn't going to exist anymore. It was created notably by an executive order by JFK. Had it remained created by an executive order, you could eliminate it with an executive order. But in the 1990s, it was statutorily granted these powers. So you can't exactly just be like, it doesn't exist anymore. So now they're like, let's talk about how bad all these grants are. There's a big messaging movement to say, here's the grants that you're giving to a play about a transgender character in Peru.
We're millions of dollars, and okay, $1 million is not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but perhaps that $1 million could have been spent elsewhere, like Western North Carolina. You know what I mean? And so I mean, it all adds up. And I just want to say our Adam Credo at the Free Beacon has a great piece up. Check it out, which lists a number of these things, because everybody is up in arms about, oh my gosh, if you shut down USAID, lives are going to be lost, AIDS in Africa and all of these things. There are carve-outs for life-saving policies and initiatives to keep them in place. So we're not talking about that. Right. What we're talking about is eliminating funding for, let's say, disabled Tajiks in Tajikistan to get them more involved in climate change initiatives, which is great. But I don't see how that is within the purview of the United States government.
Well, I think this illustrates that the game has changed. Yeah. The game has changed in that you can't just scream, these programs do some good things, you can't touch them. Because to a left of center person, the amount of money and the amount of people that the government employs is always perfect / we need more. Right. It can never be less. It can never be less. It can never eliminate this $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces. Right. It can never eliminate that. Mm-hmm. It can never eliminate a 2022 Department of State award of $70,000 to a musical event to promote the U.S. and Irish shared values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in Ireland. It can never be that we get rid of a grant to increase transgender representation through the opera. Those things can never not exist, because their argument is just like, everything we do good things. We do good things. You can't touch this.
So I get the constitutional concerns from the other side about how the authority,
we should talk about
the authority powers of Doge. But when you do look at, when they just want to say, hey, we just want to open the books and see what we're spending on. And you mentioned that $1 million for, promoting indigenous language in Guatemala, though 95% of the country speaks Spanish. Right. And again, why are we doing that when that maybe can be spent elsewhere? And even worse, $1 million plus or whatever given to groups sympathetic to Hamas and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
That's the other thing. There are far more nefarious things than
money's going to them.
There are both stupid things and nefarious things.
Right. Both.
Now, I do want to talk about the concerns about the authority here. And it seems that Rubio has said, look, I'm going to be the acting director of USAID. And actually, we should play a clip of him explaining how dealing with USAID works when you are in Congress and allegedly their bosses, which, by the way, we are too as American taxpayers.
Can it be reformed or does it need to die?
Well, that was always the goal, was to reform it. But now we have rank insubordination. Now we have basically an active effort where their basic attitude is, we don't work for anyone, we work for ourselves. No agency of government can tell us what to do. So the president made me the acting administrator. I've delegated that power to someone who's there full time, and we're going to go through the same process at USAID as we're going through now at the State Department. I think there are some, this is not about getting rid of foreign aid. There are things that we do through USAID that we should continue to do that makes sense. And we'll have to decide, is that better through the State Department or is that better through something, a reformed USAID? That's the process we're working through. There are things that are happening at USAID that we should not be involved in funding or that we have a lot of questions about, but they're completely uncooperative. So we had no choice but to take dramatic steps to bring this thing under control.
USAID does answer to Congress, to the American people. And a bunch of liberal NGOs and unelected bureaucrats have had control of this large amount of money for so long that they think that we are not entitled to ask them what they're doing. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Now, our friends who are skeptical of this move say this is a coup because Elon is unelected. He now has access to all this information. His group of 4 whiz kids who are like just a bunch of 20 to 24-year-olds who work 100 hours a week on going through government systems to figure out what's there. They don't have authority to do this. And there are privacy and security concerns with them going through government databases. Okay, so that's the argument. I think they do have some authority. The president, by executive order, updated during the Obama years, has the power to give clearances to people. I don't know what the status of that is. We should ask questions about how they're doing this. But one of the dudes who's working for Elon is a University of Nebraska student who created an AI that cracked 2,000-year-old text on burnt scrolls, carbonized, is that the word? Burnt scrolls from Mount Vesuvius to give us a window into an archaeological moment that we had never had before, in his spare time after college. Now, does this exactly translate to deep experience with government bureaucracy? No, but I'm not sure that I need him to have deep experience with government bureaucracy to go into these systems and figure things out and see where money is going.
It's also brought out the ugliness of people's attitudes on social media when they find out that these young people are involved in Doge, and the things that they're saying are just absolutely awful.
Well, and then Elon is overreacting. So Elon is like, it's a crime to expose any of these people. No, it's not. No, it's not. They are working for American taxpayers, probably at a giant discount, by the way.
Yeah.
I, for one, like the idea of having a bunch of workaholic geniuses who, frankly, if they're the kind of person that I think they are pretty apolitical and just interested in solving problems.
Right.
Yes. I'm glad to have them on board. If they were working for Obama, they would be called genius gurus.
Right. Oh, they would be so celebrated. Yeah.
So it is not an attack to reveal who these people are. It is not against the law. It is against the law to threaten them. So some of that happened.
And some of that happened online. You saw that being reproduced, and it's just nasty. So
I also say this. So Democrats, and we'll get to this, Democrats, as they try to decide what they stand for, this apparently is it.
Yeah.
USAID is it. They're going to link arms in front of USAID and say, never shall one of these taxpayer dollars go to anything else.
Right. I've mentioned this in the past, but the general idea of having an outsider come in, for me, always reminds me of the scene in the great movie Dave with Kevin Kline, and he brings in Charles Grodin's character, an accountant named Murray Blum.
Yeah.
And he just goes, help me trim the budget. And he says, honestly, how do you run a business like this? I'd be
No,
I'd be out of business if I did it this way. And they just find ways I mean, it's ridiculous. I get it. And he brings the whole cabinet and makes a whole scene in order to save money. But the point is, they're bringing outsiders because they'd be like, how do you run a business like this? This is insane. That's the first thing. Yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
and well, that's what I like about it is that the United States government is so gigantic that in fact you can hide your nefariousness in many, many places. You can steal money from people in huge ways.
Yeah.
There's, in reading the New York Times coverage of this, buried like 40 paragraphs in is like, oh, by the way, we did lose like $236 billion in fraud from this one agency.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that seems worth trying to tackle, doesn't it? Yeah. And I think I found a tweet that I sent to you that kind of summarized what I think is probably happening here, which says, I bet Elon got to D.C. This is Charlie Noyes. I bet Elon got to D.C., asked where all the money was going, and nobody could answer. So he asks how payments are made, and it turns out one department does them all. Obviously, he's like, great, that's where I should go. What's crazy is that no previous administration even thought to ask.
Yeah.
And there's some realness there. And I think the risk for, let's talk about politically, outside of the like, what is the authority for this? The risk politically for Trump is you go in and break things fast. There are disruptions in services that people care about. And they get mad at you for the change because the upside to them is not immediately obvious and the downside is. The danger for federal workers, for USAID, for Democrats, is that they way overestimate their importance to the American public.
Yeah.
And they think that when they say USAID is a pillar of American democracy.
Right.
And then people see this information about what they've been funding, that they're going to be on their side. And I don't think they're going to be. Part of the power of Elon Musk is to megaphone this stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're starting with USAID, which all the mainstream reporters say, what? This is a tiny sliver of the federal government. Right. This is like, why are you even talking about this? Well, the raw numbers are large, and you can't have it both ways. It either matters the most or it's not important.
Right. We're trying to eliminate government waste here, even if it's just one piece at a time. It is interesting that this is, the portrayal by the Democrats and the press of this sacred institution. Again, they do important things and they're helping people, and there are carve-outs for those programs.
Right.
But the thing is, I saw Jeremy Raskin, the congressman from Maryland, and other Democrats. Oh, did I say Jeremy?
Yeah.
I was thinking Jeremy Rapkin. Jamie Raskin and other Democrats, and they're out there, and they want to try to have, even Adam Kinzinger, the ex-Republican, now retired congressman, saying, don't let them in, or whatever.
No, so that's weird too, right? This thing where they're like,
as if there's going to be a standoff.
We're going to bar the doors because you're not allowed access to this part of USAID?
Yeah.
That sounds not correct to me.
In fact, the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia just said, you cannot do that.
Yeah. Again, what do they have access to?
Yeah.
Good to know. I also, when people are like, Elon Musk's genius tech bros have access to this information, I do look back on my last 12 to 15 years and the number of times I have gotten an alert that the United States government has lost my sensitive information to the Chinese. How many letters have I gotten like that? Many.
Yeah.
How many notifications have I gotten from major corporations?
Yeah.
Many. There is a part of me that says, I think the Scrolls guy could probably implement a better security protocol for my social security number on his lunch break than the U.S. government currently has.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just a thought.
And then the other thing is in this battle of ideas, and on the one hand, they're talking about, oh my gosh, how can you go after the USAID? with the power of alternative media, social media, it's not just 3 news. If there was just 3 networks or 4 networks,
Right.
yeah, be very hard to get out a message of pointing out government waste if they're not going to be reporting it. But now there are other places that are going to be talking, including the Free Beacon, that are saying, hey, here's just an example of some of the things that don't seem that necessary and maybe can be cut. Again, we're not talking $1 trillion, but why are we spending this? And can't we just do something better with it?
Well, and perhaps we're hurting ourselves by spending it. That's part of it too.
That's right.
And when they cling so hard to these, as they admit, very small percentages of the U.S. government spending, it makes you wonder, why are you clinging so hard to it?
Yeah.
And I think that the more the American people are educated about how out of hand things are in the federal government, I don't think they become more friendly to it.
Yeah.
And that, again, that is the power of Elon Musk, is that he's going to blast whatever the thing is he's working on at that time. I mean, are they just going to put in like modern computers? That might happen too, right? Like the IRS might upgrade from its
TRS-80s. They're using TRS-80s. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Anyway, so that's where I am on that. It's a bit complicated, but I'm not dismissive of the fact that certainly people who have bought homes in this area, who have counted on jobs, like that disruptions and the threat of disruptions are not something to be totally discarded. However, again, and I pointed this out on Fox News Sunday, the American people are going to learn that the protections for federal workers and the expectations of federal workers are so different from anything that they are given.
Right.
That the programs to which we're giving money in foreign countries are so wildly out of whack with recovery in Western North Carolina, which is our most present and recent example. And I think they're not going to be happy about those things.
No. And
by the way, the guy who deciphered the 2,000-year-old scrolls, who seems like just a lovely young man.
Yeah.
For that, I saw in the little documentary, he's holding a prize of $40K. And I just want to say that amazing discovery in archaeological history got a smaller award / grant than any of the ones that I think I just listed.
Right. Same. That's right.
I feel like our values are misplaced here. Anyway,
how along the lines of things that are Trump's doing on the positive side, how do you feel about the changing of the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America? Because apparently that's happening.
I think it's dumb.
It's when I went to.
It's going to cost a bunch of money in cartography. Do we need to spend money on the cartography?
Do you know how quickly?
Imagine how many signs in the Gulf of Mexico we have to change now.
Do you know how many signs had to be changed and how immediately it took effect after 2020, changing Lee Highway to Langston Boulevard?
Oh, yeah.
And that happened fast.
Yeah.
And you won't see any until if you go further out west, it changes back to
one
Lee.
of the more annoying expenditures in every major infrastructure bill is the line item where they're like, and we're going to make new road signs that say Joseph R. Biden gave you this road.
That's right. Little plaques.
Yeah.
When I was in Georgetown, one of my favorite courses was called Map of the Modern World. And it was taught by, I believe now the late Dean Charles Pirtle. And he talked about cartographic aggression. And it was talking about, for example, the Falkland Islands being renamed by the Argentinians, Les Malvinas.
Cartographic aggression.
Yes, cartographic aggression. That's what's happening in the Gulf. It's cartographic aggression. Okay.
One more thing. So Jessie Tarlov, who is a friend who works at Fox, she says, who's the Mark Elias of unconstitutional takeover of the government? Would like those lawsuits pronto, please, and thank you. Mark Elias, of course, is the famous lawyer of electoral messing around.
That's right.
Lawfare at the polls
Election
of the left.
denialism on the left.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like those lawsuits 4 years ago.
Yeah.
When there was a non-compos mentis executive who's being run like an animatronic doll for 4 years.
Again, it was like nothing to see here.
Well, and that's the thing where, like, when you're talking about, USAID, this tiny unaccountable, taxpayer-funded agency is the center of a coup on America by unelected bureaucrats. And I'm like, well, yeah, it was. Now we're maybe like shifting it back. The president was not the president for 4 years, and none of you cared.
No, and we're just moving right along to the next thing.
Okay.
That's it.
All
I
right,
think,
what else we got? Oh,
well,
we forgot DNC.
DNC,
Let's have a few words about it. We
Okay,
have
really
a few minutes.
quickly. Congratulations to Ken Martin, who won a very close race, not really, to become the next chairman of the Democratic National Committee, beating out the George Soros favorite,
Ben Wickler.
Ben Wickler. Thank you, Mary Katharine. So a lot of their money had gone, Soros money had gone to support Wickler. Instead, it is going to be Ken Martin, who wanted to try Trump for treason, which, of course, has the possible penalty of death. Just mentioning, okay, maybe you feel that way, but I'm just mentioning his background.
Right.
The interesting thing, of course, is after such a massive electoral loss in 2024, and people say, oh, it's not a landslide, he just barely won. If you look at the shift in voting across the United States and among every demographic, practically every demographic, it all shifted in Trump's favor. That, to me, is it's a landslide shift is what it was.
Right.
And what lessons have they learned? Maybe they want to come back towards the center, maybe distance themselves from all the identity politics. And I believe we have a clip of some of the requirements and the demands at the Democratic convention.
We're finding out ways to expedite this. Because of our gender balance provisions on this next ballot, you will be able to vote for 2 candidates of any gender on the next ballot. Okay? So on this next ballot, you will be able to vote for 2 candidates of any gender on the next ballot. If 2 candidates receive... I'm going to turn to Helen to clarify this last part.
You are in this next ballot where you have 2 votes. As the chair has said, you may vote for 2 males, 2 females, 2 of any gender, okay? Nope, you can't do that because we've got to balance. You could vote for 1 of any gender, okay? Or no, non-binary gender, excuse me. It is late, okay?
Yeah, I mean,
So you got to check off. The checking off boxes is still a priority.
I don't think they even understand what just happened there.
Yeah.
No, it was rife with land acknowledgments and gender discussions. They an entire panel of people who were running to be DNC chair raised their hands to blame the loss of Kamala Harris on racism and misogyny. And I do not think that strategically these things will benefit them in the future.
Yes.
But they have spent 15 years being very dedicated to this way of doing business.
They're all in.
And the bullying that is involved in that
Oh, yeah.
is something they're very comfortable with and has worked really well to a point.
Yes.
And then people get mad and they elect Donald Trump
Right.
over you. So I think they don't know how to dig themselves out of this because they've lost the skill of like the actual back and forth about this.
Are you excited? Be honest. Are you excited about the DNC number 2, David Hogg?
So that I think that's a perfect indication that they don't know how to climb out of this because David Hogg says, I'm the guru for the young people because they lost hugely. He is right in identifying the problem that they lost this huge constituency. But David Hogg has been the guru for the young people, for the DNC, or at least under its auspices in a super PAC, for years under its ideological auspices. He started the Leaders We Deserve PAC, which is sort of ironically, like, we don't deserve this, to get young people into office. He, under the money of that PAC has gone to things like backing a transgender Democrat in a primary in Alabama who did not win.
Yeah, unafraid to primary. Yes, they eat their own.
It won't surprise you if you go to the Leaders We Deserve PAC website. that you will find that most of the press room clips are just David Hogg talking, because that's what the PAC is serving. If you think you're getting dudes and young people back in the fold with David Hogg, I think you're mistaken. I don't think he has a track record of this. I think he has a track record of saying very, very, very left things and going with the tide of this quite woke movement for many years.
Right.
And
including that the Constitution does not guarantee your right to bear arms.
Yes, and he has not erased his tweets, which, although I applaud him for transparency, strategically not great, because at one point he's like, I'm the most politically toxic person there is. They'd be crazy to elevate me. Here we are.
All right.
I don't think they're making the turn quickly.
Yeah. It's going to be very exciting.
All
the next
righty.
2 to 4 years.
Also, just a quick reminder again
Please.
to Elon Musk. It's not illegal for people to name people who work in the government. They work in the government for us, just like USAID works for us. And I will strive to be nice to them while people are being mean to them, but we're allowed to talk about it.
I also want to point out, just very quickly, that I got a very exciting follow on X, the Nixon Foundation.
Oh, very nice.
And I'll tell you why I think that is. I think it's because the last episode, I mentioned my defense of the Saturday Night Massacre. That's what I think. Anyway, love it.
Got to get on that guy.
You ever pray, Henry? That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on X, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammer Podcast on YouTube or Instagram. It's a lot of fun. You should. Give us a good review. Be nice to us. Or even if you hate us, be nice to us and give us 5 stars anyway. That's fun. It's just fun. All right. Thank you for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.